Welcome to the Sunday Times Politics Weekly, where we explore the big political issues of the moment. I'm Mike Siluma, and thanks for joining us. Next month, on the 23rd of August, Zimbabweans go to the polls to choose a new president and government. The outcomes of that poll will impact not only on Zimbabwe, but on South Africa as well. To look at the prospects ahead for Zimbabwe before and after the election, we joined on the Sunday Times Politics Weekly by Professor Ibbo Mandaza, who's a prominent Zimbabwean scholar and author, as well as Ngqabutho Mabhena, who's one of the many Zimbabweans now living in South Africa, representing the Zimbabwean Community in South Africa, that organization.
You asked Mr. Ramaphosa to sit down first. I'm standing.
Now I warn you.
I need to put on my big girl panties and keep going.
You can't have two speakers standing at the same time.
Security services of the Republic of South Africa, you may intervene.
There's been several attempts on my life.
Lower that hand on
not allowed.
The president is accused of serious crimes.
I know I'm going to become the president of this country.
You are going to be the president.
I am going to be the president
of South Africa.
Of South Africa. There's no confusion.
Of South Africa.
I will cancel race.
Corrupt people do not eat alone. They have a spider web.
I'm there. I can lead them. I'm ready to be the president of this country.
I now suspend the proceedings. I have warned you.
Hey, welcome to the both of you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Prof, let me start with you. How should we read the forthcoming elections in Zimbabwe? You know, because from where I'm sitting, we've had so many false starts in terms of a possible different outcome, you know, to the election every time Zimbabwe holds an election. Now, will this one be a game changer or more of the same?
I think more of the same. It's a question of history repeating itself. You're right to cite the paradox among Zimbabweans. For the last 20 years, every election has been disputed. Every election, pre-election process has been controversial. And yet Zimbabweans flock to their elections, fever pitch excitement about elections. And as we are approaching, with every week that approaches, it's clear to some of us that the obstacles and hurdles in the way of a free, fair, and credible election are massive. Just today, you'll have heard that the court ruling in Bulawayo, that the 12 CCC candidates cannot stand for elections. Notwithstanding what might be the administrative incompetence on the part of the CCC, it's completely unprecedented that you could have a situation where a month before elections, people have been declared winners without a vote. And in a particular situation where, as it's become traditional, these are people, lower seats normally go to the opposition, whoever the opposition might be. You have a situation where the ruling party is gaining seats uncontested. I mean, it's incredible. I'm shocked. And under normal circumstances, I would say, and I've tweeted likewise, that CCC should withdraw from the elections if they lose the appeal, which they've done already. The election will become a farcical, not to mention the enormous problems already attended to this process. On the voters' roll, which Tendai BT calls a crime scene, to the delimitation, which is flawed, which Pachedu, one blogger, Pachedu, has been blowing holes into it almost daily, to the questionable independence of the ZEC, to the questionable independence of the judiciary. All these really make this election in particular the one that is likely to be very, very controversial.
And Ngqabutho, you have been watching the situation from across the Limpopo, you know, and you are living with Zimbabwean expats who are here in South Africa. What is the feeling, you know? What's the view of the election?
Well, the biggest challenge with the Zimbabweans, not only in South Africa but in the diaspora generally, is their lack of participation in the electoral process. You will know that in 2018, we in fact, 2016, we signed a petition as civil society and the political parties representatives to say, let's campaign for a diaspora vote. Advocate Gabriel Shumba and others did file a court case in Harare. The judgment was that Zimbabwean parliament must amend the constitution to give right to the diaspora to vote in countries where they are, because the diaspora community plays a critical role, particularly in the economy of Zimbabwe. You will know every time when the Minister of Finance presents his budget, you will see an increase in terms of remittances. So you cannot participate in the economic activity through remittances, but you cannot participate in terms of deciding who should lead Zimbabwe. So that's you're
saying that you can participate through remittances?
Yes, but you have no right to vote, because for you to vote, you have to go to Zimbabwe to cast your vote. So a number of African countries in the SADC region do allow their citizens in the diaspora to participate in the electoral process. In the case of Zimbabwe, we still have to travel to Zimbabwe. So you have the challenge of campaigning to get people to go to Zimbabwe to register to vote, whether they do that during holidays, and then to go and cast their votes. We have wanted a situation where Zimbabweans in South Africa and in neighboring countries should participate in the electoral process. Zanu-PF always argues that they cannot allow a diaspora vote until sanctions are removed, but you have no country in Africa that has imposed sanctions on Zimbabwe. To the contrary, SADC in one of its summits in Tanzania resolved that every 25th of October there should be a campaign around the removal of sanctions. So it is clear that there is no African country or SADC country that has placed the sanctions on Zimbabwe, and we do not understand why we should not participate.
Yeah, but what is the mood, and the anticipation or expectation among Zimbabweans in the diaspora about the election? I mean, do they are they feeling hopeful? Are they feeling? Professor Mandaza has got a very pessimistic view, not without reason, But I just want to find out what people who are looking from the outside.
They share the same sentiments like Prof. That nothing has changed from 2018. You remember we went to the 2018 elections under the same conditions, and we know what happened. You can count 20 years back, as the Prof was saying, that election outcome is always disputed. The opposition will always say they have a mechanism of dealing with the vote rigging, but it is not there. We saw that it was said in 2018, it's been said now, but we know the outcome. So people in the diaspora do not expect that on the 23rd of October or post the 23rd, you are going to have a new government established in Zimbabwe. It's going to be a continuation of the government that we have, which therefore speaks to the reconstruction of the Zimbabwean economy, because Zanu-PF for the last 43 years has demonstrated that it has no ability to reconstruct Zimbabwean economy. And you are then going to continue to have an influx of young people into South Africa and neighboring countries. And we know what this influx means in terms of competition for low resources or few resources in South Africa and other countries, which then leads to the outbreaks which we have seen against migrants.
Prof, the Ngqabutho has already gone there. I was going to come to you with the question, but he's already tabled it. When one looks, I mean, Zanu-PF basically has been in charge since, 1980. How concerned do you think its leadership is about the state of the country, whether you're talking about the spiraling inflation rate, the state of the economy, or the exodus of skills, for example, from the country? What is going on in the? And I know that you're not a psychologist by training, but what have you noticed anything that suggests concern about the state of the country in Zanu-PF?
Yes, there's a sense of helplessness, often couched in rhetoric which wants to flaunt, exaggerate successes, even misplaced successes. It's a helplessness that has to do more with a state which has become depleted of skills, a state which is far from the kind of state we had in the 80s, where there was growing capacity as time went on. So it's a state which is overwhelmed, in my view, by its own failures. A state which is incapable of reform, neither politically nor economically. It's and since the coup of 2017, which in my view was the beginning of the end of this regime, it is almost inevitable that this regime is on its way out. And the coup, as I said earlier on, is the beginning of that. And I know whatever the outcome of the elections, there is no way that this regime can survive in the form that it's in. It's fatally divided within itself. It's fatally flawed in terms of the personnel that run it, whether it's the president, his ministers. It's just there. It's just there. And so it's a matter of time. Historians will reflect one day and say the demise of the Mugabe, Mnangagwa, Chiwenga regime began in earnest in 2017. And the evidence so far is that they have no capacity to turn things around, neither economically nor politically. We are getting deeper into a crisis. Yeah,
I saw somewhere where you made reference to how, from a political point of view, Zanu-PF is different from many other liberation movements in the way that it perceives the opposition. Do you want to elaborate on that as to what is the difference?
Yes, I've said this before, that since independence, the attitude of the Zanu-PF and the state has been one to regard the opposition as an enemy to be vanquished, whether it was ZAPU under Joshua Nkomo, Zoom under Tekere, MDC under Tsvangirai, and now CCC. There's an embedded and implicit intolerance for opposition. It's almost as if we have just a one-party state. And it makes farcical the idea of democracy. As someone put it the other day, that you have a new parliament built just outside Harare. And it has the typical Westminster model, front benches for the ruling party and front benches for the opposition. Now, it's almost as if Zanu-PF doesn't want to see anybody in the opposition. And that has been the tendency, to win all, vanquish them to nothing. And it's only Zimbabwe who's in that mold, in my way I put it. You don't see that in other countries, And yet, the SADC, and in particular South Africa, there, you have leadership, including this Mbalula guy, bellowing praises for Zanu-PF. It's very stupid in my view, very short-sighted and ignorant, Yeah, it reflects very badly on the South African leadership, if I may say so.
Yeah,
and I think one day we would want to tell Mbalula in his face.
Yeah.
That he's being very stupid and short-sighted.
Yeah, I would like us to come back to that point, of what the region and South Africa in particular can do to assist in Zimbabwe. But before we get to that, I wanted us to look at the opposition itself. We've just been talking about Zanu-PF and its role in the crisis, probably playing a major role in precipitating the crisis. But what about the opposition? Would you say that the opposition has come to the party in terms of its contribution in changing the situation in Zimbabwe? Or is it just too fragmented?
Well, the first thing to say is that, of course, the opposition has been one that has been battered, as I said, since independence. It is little or no room to operate. Right now, you can see that CCC, which was MDC before, lost its headquarters, lost its offices. There's no offices at all. It is by its own admissions, without institutions around it, and so forth and so on. And all the same, when they've been given opportunity to be party to the state, as was the case during the GNU, they showed a very startling lack of ideas. They haven't been able, since the opposition came into being, to define an alternative policy framework beyond just highlighting the flaws of the Zanu-PF government. Nothing beyond merely demanding that they take over from Zanu-PF government. So, yeah, I mean, you know, for example, that neither Zanu-PF nor CCC have election manifestos. For the first time, you've parties, and all they're in for is competition. For Zanu-PF to stay in power, and for CCC to take over power. Well, when you reduce the struggle to that level, where the other competitor is already got state power, the outcome is well known. It's inevitable. It's forgiven, a foregone conclusion.
And Ngqabutho, are you seeing the same picture as the Prof?
Certainly, because with the opposition, in our view, is not building on past victories. Because this should be a continuation of the struggle when the workers came together in 1991 to establish the national, or to gather under the banner of the National Working People's Convention to redefine the new agenda for Zimbabwe, to say, how do you complete the liberation of Zimbabwe? We are seeing an opposition currently, as led by Nelson Chamisa, trying to define itself outside the legacy of the MDC or what the MDC stood for. If you look into their parliamentary candidates currently, they are new faces. Very few, maybe 3 or 4, very few that have been part of the MDC. And there's this attempt to try and distance themselves from the agenda that was set by the MDC, which again is then presents its penalty to Zanu-PF, a political penalty, like what happened in Bulawayo, where 12 MPs are now said not to contest unless there's going to be an appeal. It's an opposition that has not come to the table in terms of providing a political administration to run an effective political organization that is able to campaign as grassroots based. The CCC, it has the mass support. But at times you feel that they do not know what to do with the mass support that they have. Hence all these political blunders that then Zanu-PF takes advantage of. Then on Zanu-PF in this election, if we go back to the gold mafia and you check some of their candidates, Mnangagwa has been mobilizing what one will be calling a thugs. To be the parliamentary candidates. We saw the invitation of the international former boxing champion to Harare as part of the electoral campaign. So you have people that are part of the looting class that Mnangagwa now fronts as parliamentary candidates. And you see the massive spending that is there in the campaign of Zanu-PF, whether through crook or hook, which you will not see in the opposition. I was laughing the other day when ladies in some rural areas were celebrating that they were given some pieces of chicken as part of an election campaign. So our election is now being reduced to some freebies. It is not an election that is based on a clear political program to say, how do you reconstruct the economy of Zimbabwe? How do you complete the liberation of Zimbabwe? It is absent in this election.
Prof, just to come back to you, some people have, and I think you are among them, have argued that what the country needs is not another election, but a national dialogue. So some people have spoken about Zimbabwe's Lancaster House moment. Why is that? Are we saying that the electoral route has turned into a cul-de-sac?
Yes, repeatedly so, and inevitably so, given the structure of the state, a secret state, in which the ruling party has won, in inverted commas, every election through the facilitation of the military and the security system, and has tended to use elections as a means of legitimizing the illegitimate, in my view, with every election outcome. So yes, so we have proposed since 2016, a group of us, led by Suppers Trust and the Platform for Concerned Citizens, for a transitional authority, such as that which the Sudanese tried, using our document, in fact, which didn't work out. But the idea was to get a transitional arrangement to give Zimbabwe a breathing space during which political and economic reforms are undertaken before the next elections, through a transitional government which reflects the various parties in its composition in terms of affiliation and association, which reflects also the technocratic background that Zimbabwe is well known for, and a small team of people who moved the reform agenda, and in doing so, help Zimbabwe transit from a non-democratic system towards an accountable democratic order in which the executive is accountable, the legislature is vibrant, and the judiciary is fiercely independent. That is what we should be doing. We are hoping that if there is a hung parliament, if there is a runoff, that we would try and use the region, when we've been in touch with South Africa, regional powers, people like Obasanjo and others, to see whether we can have an international conference in September to try and put on the table this reform agenda and use eminent persons like Obasanjo, Motlanthe, Kikwete in Tanzania, Uhuru in Kenya, to mediate among Zimbabwean civic society, political parties, towards a comprehensive political and economic settlement. Where we've been trying to sell this idea for a long time, but there are no takers, neither in the ruling party nor in the opposition, because they all believe in elections. The opposition believes that if every election they'll win. They never want to understand the fact that it's hardly likely that there will be a transfer of power to them, even if they win. So we're hoping that if Kaskwera is allowed to stand, that there will be at least a runoff, which gives us a window of opportunity to bring Zimbabweans together, even to preempt the runoff, and say, let's get together, let's have a coalition as a form of a kind of transitional government to the next election.
Now, another person, and I'm going to ask your view as well, Ngqabutho Mabhena, after the prof. Another person might say, well, what incentive is there for, particularly given its track record, of repression, of the opposition? What incentive is there or can there be for Zanu-PF to agree to such a conversation or a dialogue or a conference?
Yeah, in a typical fashion, a transitional authority is usually the Lancaster House moment, where the contestants for power, or where the opposing forces, so to speak, have come to the end of the road, a kind of a stalemate, or the worst case scenario where there's just outright bloodshed everywhere, such as we have in Sudan, and which forces everybody concerned to say, look, let's find a way forward. That's what we call the Lancaster moment. We are hoping that the elections, if they take place, that there will be this window of opportunity for a Lancaster-type moment, during which all parties, including Zanu-PF, will find it prudent to go that route in the interest of their own survival as individuals in the case, because as you know, Lancaster House, which I also attended, there was amnesties and amnesty arrangements to avoid revenge and retribution, and so on and so forth. So basically, we are saying that let's suppose, for example, Zanu-PF does not win outright, or that Mnangagwa loses, which is possible, that would create a kind of urgency an agency on their part or something like that. Likewise, we believe that the situation where there's a lot of complaint about the possibility that if Chamisa wins outright, he might end up behaving just like how Zanu-PF has been behaving. So there's increasingly a tendency to argue for an all-inclusive kind of dispensation, all-inclusive beyond the two parties, to include civic society and smaller parties. We have some of us being recommending the proportional representation, so that the governments in Africa, including Zimbabwe, become more inclusive than this Westminster model, which is so ill-suited to our purposes as nation states in the making.
And Ngqabutho, from where you're sitting, do you agree with the Prof that the route of the election is a dead route, basically? That a new way to solve the problem needs to be found?
Indeed, because the elections are not going to resolve any challenges that Zimbabwe is faced with. And the question that we are confronted with is that how do you dismantle a deep state through an election? We don't think that is possible. So you need to have this dialogue so that it becomes inclusive. Zimbabweans participate in it. And the main agenda, in our view, should be building the national democratic economy in Zimbabwe. We said in 2017, ahead of the election, it was just some weeks before the coup, that the elections, the outcome of an election was going to be disputed, and we're going to then spend time talking about legitimacy. This is what happened, and this is what is going to happen beyond August 23. So you need to chart a new path to say, how do you reconstruct Zimbabwe? How do you dismantle the deep state? Because we do not think that those that rolled military tanks in November will easily give power to the opposition. We don't think so. So it's important that we begin a campaign which Prof speaks about to say, is it feasible to have dialogue that is going to be supported not only internally in Zimbabwe but by key regional players. We have a Brics summit that is coming up in this country in August. Zimbabwe must benefit from the programs of Brics. We must also use that as an opportunity to say, how do we reconstruct Zimbabwe? How do we position Zimbabwe as a key international player? But you cannot do so when you have an outcome of an election that is disputed.
Prof, this brings us to the question of the, I mean, you refer to the change that happened in 2017 as a coup. So we presume that the army is still the power behind the throne, as it were. Now, what should happen with the role of the Zimbabwean army as things stand now? As Ngqabutho is saying that, even if we're looking at the possibility of a negotiation, etc., would you see the army being there negotiating, or what would happen in a situation like that to the army or with the army?
Well, it would be as simple as restoring constitutionalism, curing the coup thereby, and restoring the rule of law, as is the case in every country in the region, with the military back in the barracks, as is the case in the region. So Zimbabwe is the odd man out, one might say. There's nothing unusual or unexpected of the army going back to the barracks, and I think it's feasible. Absolutely feasible. I think the rank and file of the army would gladly want to be seen as a professional army in the barracks as their counterparts are in the rest of the region and elsewhere.
Okay. I just before we conclude, you earlier in our conversation, Prof, you touched on the issue of you mentioned Vila Mbalula specifically, but more broadly, what sort of role might assist the Zimbabwean democratization process from the part of the region, but also from the part of South Africa? I know that South Africa's involvement in Zimbabwe has been controversial for a long time. Is there a role for South Africa and the region in Zimbabwe or not, maybe?
Of course, there can be no solution to the Zimbabwean crisis without South Africa. But on the same vein, it's important that South African leadership becomes more informed about Zimbabwe, and not put their heads in the sand and harp on senseless reference to the fraternity of former liberation movements. Everyone knows, including those of us who are in the liberation movement, that the liberation movements have long served their purpose, and they've failed dismally to take over the post-apartheid or post-colonial situation and move it towards an era of economic independence and sustained development. Everyone knows that. They failed. So why you harp on them, except unless you are trying to justify your own flagging fortunes in South Africa? So I think one needs a more informed leadership in South Africa, a more well-informed ANC. And I like to say I've had dealings with the DECO. They are much more informed, much up to it. But I'm sad to hear the Mbalula of this world churning out nonsense, in the face of such glaring realities such as we have in Zimbabwe. Having said that, I don't see any capacity at all in SADC to move things forward in Zimbabwe, and certainly not without South Africa. South Africa remains a key factor, and we, on our part, as part of this conference we're talking about, we are almost pleading that South Africa be involved, because without South Africa, nothing will move forward.
And just lastly, the whole question of sanctions, have they been useful to anyone? Whether the people who are trying to assist Zimbabwe or to Zimbabweans themselves, to move things in the right direction. And Ngqabutho, do you want to come in ahead of the pro?
Well, we do not think that sanctions have been effective. This is why we are calling for their removal. And of course, the economic collapse is not as a result of sanctions. It is a result of the neoliberal policies that have been advanced by Zanu-PF since 1991. So there's no link between sanctions and the collapse of the Zimbabwean economy. We need to separate the two. But Zanu-PF is hiding behind the question of sanctions when it fails to deliver on basic services.
Prof, the last word to you. What do we do with the question of sanctions? Because it looks like there are parts of the world where people are really almost wedded to the idea of sanctions on Zimbabwe.
Yes, my colleague, it's a red herring. It's a red herring. It's completely secondary to the economic debate on Zimbabwe. Very secondary. I'm not doubting the impact of it indirectly, though that may be, in the sense that Zimbabwe will not be able to enjoy the access to the FDIs and international financial institutions. But again, I repeat, is quite secondary to the major issue of the inherent incapacity of the Zimbabwean state to manage its affairs, the inherent corruption right from the top, which has seen Zimbabwe lose billions of dollars over the last 10, 15 years. Estimates are that the Zimbabwe debt, which is now at 18 billion, is nothing compared to the amount of money stashed abroad. People are estimating that $35 to $40 billion stashed abroad with the powerful and state actors in Zimbabwe. So that is one of the things that needs to be resolved in the kind of conference we're talking about.
Yes.
We need a full disclosure from those that are said to be imposing sanctions. They know where the money is lying. I know some years ago I got confidential information that one of the leaders in Zimbabwe had £78 million frozen in the UK banks by the British government. So when you confront the British government about it, they deny it. And yet in the same vein, they'll tell you we have frozen the assets of this person and that person, that person. So why isn't it fair that you should tell the citizens of that country what assets of their leaders you have frozen?
More detail,
A guarded secret. So it's the international community, I dare say so-called, is complicit in our misery.
Yeah.
Yes.
Unfortunately, we've just about run out of time.
Thank you very much.
Yes. With my guest, Professor Ibbo Mandaza, who's a prominent Zimbabwean scholar and author, as well as Ngqabutho Mabhena, who is one of many Zimbabweans now living in South Africa. We appreciate your time. Hopefully, we will talk again either closer to the election or after the election, just to reflect, what would have transpired. But we really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
I'm Mike Siluma. Until next time, do stay safe, stay blessed, and let's do good for our country.